Hi everyone. So last time we had talked about all those poor lost Europeans looking for Asia who stumbled across North America. And everybody knows that in 1492 Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered North America, right? Well, not really. Columbus actually landed in the Bahamas, and he discovered Cuba and Haiti and a lot of those Caribbean islands. And in fact, he wasn't even the first European to come over this way. Eric the Red had settled in Greenland in the 10th century, and Leif Erikson founded a settlement in Newfoundland, Canada in the 11th century. And now Columbus isn't important because he quote unquote discovered America. He's important because he made this voyage at a time of European expansion. It was at a time where the European powers were ready to expand across their borders, across the oceans, and settle in new places. So in October of 1492, Columbus landed in the Bahamas, and the period of American history finally starts. But really, America had a long history before that, and it has to do with the people that Columbus found when he got here. The first people to come to America weren't even Europeans at all. They were all of Asiatic origins, and they came over during the Stone Age from anywhere between 40,000 and 20,000 years ago. Now, all ancient humans were hunter-gatherer types. They followed herds of animals that they relied on for food. Now, this was also a time of several ice ages. The Ice Age made the sea level drop, and there was a land bridge that existed in between what is now Russia and Alaska. So as the large herds of animals moved across the Bering Land Bridge, they were followed by the hunting tribes who depended upon the herds for meat, skins, and bone for their food and their technology. So we know that these new Americans came and settled in America over a very long period of time because we can study their racial traits of the various Indian tribes in existence today. The first immigrants were of an earlier racial stock than modern Asians. They have some features in common with the modern Asiatic peoples, like straight black hair, little body hair, and sparse beards. However, their skin coloring is more reddish than brownish yellow, and they do not have the characteristic which is found in modern Asians called the epicanthic eye fold. As more tribal groups entered North America, these early tribes moved east and south across the Rockies and the Great Plains, and south into Central South America. All of the earliest arrivals to North America are from this earliest group of immigrants. A somewhat later group of arrivals in America had a slight epicanthic fold, a rounder face, and were of generally slighter build. They traveled down the Great Plains and finally settled in Central America and Mexico. They founded great civilizations in Central America, the Olmecs, Toltecs, Aztecs, and Mayas. Some of these tribes traveled into South America and mixed with a group of earlier arrivals. But the most important group of these was to become the Incas, who built an empire in present-day Peru and Ecuador. The last peoples to arrive in America were more Asian in appearance. They looked very much like the Asians of Siberia. They had a pronounced epicanthic fold, they were slight in build, and usually tended to have a good deal more body fat than their predecessors. This is because they were genetically adjusted to live in the bitter cold climate of Siberia and China in the late ice ages. They settled in Alaska and northwestern Canada, and some moved all the way down into the Amazon basin of South America. By 1450, there may have been as many as 20 million American Indians living in the Western Hemisphere. There were as many as 500 language groups and hundreds of tribes spread out all over North and South America. Now, there were three major Indian cultures that attained a high degree of civilization by the time that the Spanish made contact in the New World, and these are the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Inca. The Mayans lived in Central America in what is today Guatemala, southern Mexico, and Belize. Their civilization appears to have begun in about 300 AD, and by about 1000 AD they had a very advanced civilization. They had developed a form of writing based on pictographs for objects and ideographs for ideas. They excelled in architecture, astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. They lived in cities and in farming communities which grew up around their great temples. Their temples were great pyramids made of carved stones, some of which weighed as much as 10 tons. The Mayans were sun worshippers, and they practiced human sacrifice. Their religious calendars contained a short year made up of 365 days, and a long year which was made up of about 500 short years. The most interesting thing about the Mayan civilization is the fact that in about 1300 AD, The Mayans left their cities and temples, never to return to them. The great empire was broken up and the great buildings left for the jungle to take over. Just why the Mayans deserted their cities has been a subject of lots of speculation, but is still unknown. Now the Incas lived in the mountain valleys of the Andes in South America. They reached a high level of civilization by about 1200 AD. By this time, they had domesticated llamas and alpacas for wool and transportation, and they kept dogs and guinea pigs for food. They raised potatoes and tomatoes, among some other foods. And by 1500, the Incas had created a large empire in northern South America. This empire was connected by a system of roads, and imperial runners took messages to all parts of the far-flung empire from the capital at Cuzco. The emperor of the Incas was believed to be the earthly offspring of the sun. When the Spanish arrived in Peru, the emperor of the Incas, Atahualpa, sent representatives to study them and welcome them to his land. The Spanish attacked these representatives, and since the emperor had not told his representatives to fight with the Spanish, they were slaughtered by the Spanish without even putting up any defense. Atahualpa was taken prisoner, and the Spanish told the Incas that if a large room was filled with gold, then Atahualpa would be freed. The room was filled, but the priests of the Spanish were unable to convert Atahualpa to Christianity, so he was executed for heresy. As a result, the Inca Empire became part of the Spanish Empire. Beginning in about 900 BC, there were a series of Indian civilizations in central Mexico. By about 1100 AD, the Toltec Empire were masters of all central Mexico. They were an advanced civilization, masters of ruthless government, but also impressive architecture, astronomy, and agriculture. By about 1200, a subject nation of the Toltec, the Aztecs, conquered the Toltec nation and took over their empire. The Aztec civilization began to flourish by about 1350 AD. The Aztecs had a great amount of leisure time because their subject tribes provided them with the food and gold which they paid for as tribute. The Aztecs were ruled by a king priest who was elected by the Aztec warrior nobility. And even though he was an elected official, he was considered to be the son of the chief Aztec god, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name, but it represented the feathered serpent. Look at your lecture notes and you'll find this god's name. Now the Aztecs had several interesting religious festivals, and all of them included human sacrifice. Archaeologists estimate that by about 1500, the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan, had a population of some 2 million. But by the time the Spanish really arrived there in force, the population had dwindled down to less than 1 million as a result of diseases that the Spanish carried that the native peoples had never encountered and thus had built up no natural resistance to. So something important to remember is as these people came over from Asia, they were originally part of the same basic groups. But as these Indians spread out, they started to form their own tribes, create their own languages, started wars with each other. But they were all of the same basic heritage, and that's why there's so many similarities in geographical groups between these tribes. So by about the 16th century, the eastern seaboard of North America was inhabited by many nations of American Indians who shared a fairly similar cultural heritage and spoke primarily the same dialects of the Algonquin language. In the north, Indians lived in small tribal groups, and they subsisted by means of slash-and-burn agriculture and by hunting and fishing. Food was never plentiful enough all year round, and their annual subsistence cycle was one of plenty and of famine. In the spring, tribes moved from the coast and planted corn, beans, and squash. They lived on fish and shellfish through the summer. And after fall harvest, the small northern tribes moved inland to hunt and trap birds, deer, bear, and squirrels. Food rarely lasted through the long, harsh winter, and every tribe experienced some period that they called the starving time. In the coastal south, weather and soil conditions made it possible for larger tribes to live together and in more permanent settlements. Tribes like the Secotans and the Chesapeake lived in large settlements, raising corn, vegetables, and tobacco inside large earthwork and palisade fortifications, and hunting and fishing all year round. So when the Europeans arrived, they found all sorts of things that the Indians had that they were unfamiliar with. And here's just a few of the things that they found. Potatoes were raised by the Inca. Corn, or maize, was raised by all of the tribes. Squash was found in northern Mexico and in North America. True beans were also found in Mexico and North America. The Inca raised quinine, and tomatoes. They found avocados in central Mexico. They found chocolate used as currency by the Aztecs. And in Mexico, they found pineapples. They found chewing gum from the Mayans. They found tobacco in all of Mexico and in North America. And they found maple sugar and candy in northeastern North America. To the Spanish, however, there was one item that was most important that the Indians of Central and South America had in quantity, and that was gold. Lots and lots of gold. And we'll see how this search for gold influences European expansion next time.